All right, at the end of the last video, I asked you to evaluate these last two examples that we discussed for average rate of change problems. So for the first example, I got negative 0.3. It looks like I accidentally erased my work that I had here. But yeah, I got negative 0.3. And then for the second example, and I was getting a little tired of rewriting this piece. We'll have to write it a lot, but I kind of skipped that. Let's see, 0.6 over 23, we could think of that as 6 over 230, which reduces to 3 over 115. So I'm just going to leave that as a fraction. We should be able to work with numbers like this without a calculator. So I would try to practice not using a calculator for these. All right, so discussing them in context, it's really important that we address, and I'm going to just kind of write out to the side and kind of no man's land off the page. We said that these are average rate of change, that like examples, that's what we're evaluating. So average rate of change. And when we express that, we're going to have to either use those three words, average rate and change, or we could use the words average rate of increase or decrease. We just have to watch our signs. So for example, let's look at this first one, and I'll use the word decrease, but I'll tell you how else you could write it with the word change. So in this first example, what I would say is between, because again, going back to like this average rate of change, it has to be between 2 points. So the rate of change between this particular point and the other. So in context, it's between 2 points in time. So between t equals 16 and t equals 18. And then we've got to have units on that time. So our units are months, and specifically months since January 2010. I'm just going to abbreviate. So between t equals 16 and t equals 18 months since January 10, well, what happened? Well, the population is changing at an average rate. So when we talk about average rate of change, it's the average rate at which y is changing with respect to x between two particular values of x. So in this case, the average rate at which p, the population, is changing with respect to t, time, between two particular values of time. All right, so it's the population that changes. So what I would probably say here is I'd say the population of the species. And here's where we could either say changed or we could say decreased. We don't want to say increased because it's negative. So the population of this species, I'm going to say decreased. And the population didn't decrease by 0.3 thousand. It's decreasing at a rate. So the population of this species decreased, and I'm actually going to say decreases. The tense doesn't matter. At an average rate, because it's not an instantaneous rate, of, since I use the word decreases, I'm now just going to say 0.3. If I use the word changed, I would need to keep the negative. So it doesn't really matter to me what you use, but the change goes with the negative. Decreased, you're absorbing the negative in the word decreased. You would just drop the negative and say 0.3. All right, decreased at an average rate of 0.3. Now we've got to have our units. And again, like if we, let's see, I don't have a ton of space to go off to the side. If you look at the example, the units on top, that's measured in thousands of individuals in that species. So that's like, we've been saying thousands of individuals. I know the prompt never used the word individuals. At the bottom, the units on bottom are time. So, or sorry, the variable on bottom is time. So the units on bottom are months. So that rate it's going to be the units on top per the units on bottom. So an average rate of 0.3 thousands of individuals per month. And if you just think of any other rates you can think of, they're always something per something for the units. So for example, your heart rate is measured in beats per minute. When you're driving to school or to wherever in your car, the velocity of your car is measured in miles per hour in America, depending, it could be kilometers per hour elsewhere. So you've got to have something per something, and it's the units on top per the units on bottom. All right, I would like you guys to pause the video and write the explanation for the last example. So take a pause, do that, and then resume the video to check. All right, so here's what I would write for the last example. And again, the things I'm looking for, so the things you want to check for, yours might be worded a little differently. We've got to have between t equals 0 and t equals 23. So that addresses like the bottom part of our average rate of change quotient. We've got to have units, so I need to know what the time units are. So the units are months. If we think what's changing, well, it's P. P is changing. So what is P? P is the population of the species. So we've got to define P in context. And then we've got to have, from our average rate of change, we've got to have those words. So I've got to have average. If you don't include the word average, it's really not a correct statement. We've got to say that it's a rate. And then we've got to either have the word increasing or changing or increases or changes. We wouldn't say decreasing here because our value is positive. We've got to include the actual value that we're trying to put into context. So the 3/115 or however you express that. And then lastly, gosh, I'm going to run out of highlighter colors. I should get a new one. Here we go. Lastly, we need the units on that final, the 3/115. So just like before, the units are going to be thousands of individuals per month. And anytime we're working with a rate, it's got to be something per something. All right, so this first part is just like an introduction to working with functions in context. I know it can be a lot of writing, but the communication piece of calculus is actually very, very important. We will have to communicate more clearly in this class than we probably have in past classes. So going forward, we're going to talk on the next page about domains of functions. I'm just looking at the time of how long I've been recording this video. I'm going to just pause and make a new one to start domain. So join me there in the next video.